Imagine a country, once united against a common enemy, suddenly plunged back into a fierce internal struggle. Welcome to China, post-World War II. In today's video, we're going to explore the dramatic saga of China's internal conflict. This is a story that starts with the rocky aftermath of World War II and carries on into the uncertainties of the present day. We'll look at the gripping chapters of the Chinese Civil War that reignited after Japan's retreat. Stay with us as we unravel this fascinating true story and connect these historical dots to the present, where you can see the echoes of the past in President Xi's recent speech about Taiwan. But before we explore this intricate web of history and politics, let's set the stage with a dramatic turn of events. In a striking speech to commemorate the 130th anniversary of Mao Zedong's birth, Chinese President Xi Jinping declared that the complete reunification of our motherland with Taiwan is an inevitable and righteous cause. He warned other party members to prepare for the worst case and most extreme scenario. His address painted a vivid picture of China's unwavering stance on Taiwan. His words come after heightened tensions and a series of strategic rivalries, particularly with the US over issues like Taiwan, the South China Sea, technology, and trade. He appeared confident about Taiwan's future. President Xi presented himself and his policies and direct continuations of Mao's legacy. The ceremony at the Great Hall was just one part of a series of state-backed events celebrating Mao's life and legacy. From paying respect at Mao's mausoleum in Tiananmen Square to releasing new editions of his work, it was a symbolic day full of political messaging. The speech also came before Taiwanese voters were set to elect their next president. His words are a bold prediction and a strategic positioning of China on the world stage. It's a clear sign of China's future under his leadership and the potential path for Taiwan. But how did this all start? Well, our story begins shortly before the end of World War II. The 1943 Cairo Conference was a significant moment that shaped China's post-war landscape. Here, global leaders, including those from the UK, USA, and China, came together. They established an important principle: Chinese territorial integrity was crucial. They declared that all of Japan's seized territory, like Manchuria, Taiwan, and the Pescadores, should be returned to China. This was meant to set the stage for a post-war order where China's sovereignty would be respected and restored. However, as the war drew to a close, this agreement would soon be tested. Now, let's skip forward. The year is 1945, and the world breathes a sigh of relief as the Second Sino Japanese War ends. But in China, the end of one conflict simply signals the start of another. It was a civil war that would shape the future of an entire nation. Japan's surrender brought relief, but also uncertainty. The Allies entered China to accept the Japanese surrender and shape the post-war political landscape. This complicated the already intricate political situation in China. The Chinese Civil War was a simmering cauldron of ideological conflict that had been on and off since the 1920s. However, with the end of World War II, the Civil War was about to erupt again. This wasn't a simple battle for territory, but a clash of visions for China's future. On the one side stood the nationalist forces, led by Kuomintang KMT government under the determined leadership of Chiang Kai-Shek. The KMT dealt with most of the fight against the Japanese invaders. They wanted to unify China under a nationalist anti-communist regime. They pictured a modern China, drawing on Western ideas and government models deeply rooted in traditional Chinese culture. Opposing them were the communist forces, led by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, under the strong leadership of Mao Zedong. His vision was radically different, as he wanted to overthrow the feudal system. He wanted to establish a version of China inspired by the Soviet model, but adapted to Chinese conditions. The CCP first became popular after their guerrilla warfare tactics against the Japanese and their promise of land reform. In 1945, a groundbreaking series of negotiations took place in Chongqing. The city had suffered the ravages of war and had become a symbol of resistance and resilience. Here, KMT and CCP representatives engaged in tense discussions over China's political future. They tried to forge a path to peace and unity with a framework for a post-war government. But despite the urgency and the high stakes, these discussions failed. This failure was a turning point. Both parties had drastically different views on China's future. The KMT wanted a centralized government based on Sun Yat-sen's principles. However, the CCP wanted to create a socialist state led by the proletariat. This ideological divide, coupled with the scars of the previous decade, made any agreement almost impossible. As the last Japanese troops withdrew and the Chongqing negotiations crumbled, the fragile unity between the KMT and CCP during the joint resistance against Japan quickly shattered. The hostilities and mistrust quickly resurfaced, with China being plunged into a full-scale civil war. The hope for a peaceful and unified China after World War II evaporated, giving way to a renewed period of internal conflict and ideological battles. In August 1945, the Soviet Union joined forces with the Allies and declared war on Japan. They quickly occupied Manchuria in a move that drastically changed the power dynamics in China. The Soviets felt sympathetic towards the CCP and helped to support the Communists. They gave the CCP captured Japanese weapons and helped them to expand in northern China. They significantly improved their military capabilities and helped to make them a formidable force. Meanwhile, the nationalist forces were backed by the US. They moved swiftly to take back areas formerly held by the Japanese. Their goal was to reassert control over the entire country and create a unified nationalist government. But things were quickly changing. The Communists were gaining ground in northern China thanks to Soviet support. The conflict reached a tipping point in 1946. Despite their initial efforts at cooperation and coexistence, the clear differences between the nationalists and the communists were too big to overcome. Soon enough, it escalated into open hostility. The conflict was fierce and brutal. This wasn't a battle for territory. It was an ideological struggle for China's future. The nationalists had the advantage early in the war, with intense military campaigns and shifting alliances. They had better equipment and international backing. The communists used guerrilla warfare tactics, popular support, and strategic alliances. But soon enough, the tide gradually turned in the CCP's favor. The nationalists struggled with internal issues, including corruption and a lack of popular support. By 1949, the momentum had completely shifted in the favor of the communists. The nationalists simply couldn't stop the communist advance. They suffered a series of devastating defeats. The communist forces swept across China, ending in the capture of Beijing. On October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong stood in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. He declared the People's Republic of China had been established, a new era had begun. The nationalist government retreated to Taiwan, where they established a separate regime. It was the end of the Civil War, but also the beginning of a new and complex chapter in China's history. It would be one of divided governments, ideological rivalry, and the continuing question of Taiwan. Peace is often fragile and carries the seeds of past conflicts. The Chinese Civil War created a lasting division, a wound that has never fully healed. Today, as we reflect on these troubling times, President Xi's words remind us of China's difficult history. His clear stance on surely unifying Taiwan with mainland China is more than a diplomatic statement. It's a reminder of a conflict that once tore China apart and could again shape its future. His words clearly indicate that the Taiwan issue is at the heart of China's national identity and political ambitions. It's a continuation of the unification ideal, a key part of the CCP's policy. It also continues the narrative of unity, sovereignty, and the resolution of historical problems, but also raises questions about how China could achieve this unity and the consequences for regional and global stability. His words are a roadmap for the future. His decisions will determine if the Chinese Civil War's shadow continues to loom over China, or if they can move forward into an era of peace and understanding. But the question that now lingers is whether history will repeat itself. Will the unhealed scars of the Chinese Civil War open up once again? Can the lessons of the past guide the current and future leaders towards a path of peace and reconciliation? Or are we on the brink of another conflict that could change the region and the world? The answer is still unwritten, but one thing is certain: it will shape the course of history forever.